I'm at the back of Ndeanon. It's at the center of Carleton University's campus, and it's a hub for students. Even in the middle of the day, the doors themselves are locked, and the accessible door button doesn't appear to be working. You might be thinking, maybe the button doesn't work because the door is locked. Don't worry, we'll come back to that later. Let's keep going for now. Carleton University advertises itself on its website as Canada's most accessible, or sometimes one of Canada's most accessible universities. According to Statistics Canada, about 1 in 10 Canadians identify as having a disability that affects mobility. As a new student at campus, I noticed little things like these that made me wonder how true Carleton's claim of being Canada's most accessible campus really was. I wanted to speak with Sarah Trick. She's someone who uses a wheelchair to navigate Carleton's campus. I wanted to discuss specifically a door like this. But as we wanted to get to this door, we encountered another larger problem than the doors themselves. This ramp here means you can't get to or from these doors. The lip is too large for most wheelchair wheels.
So, what makes this ramp absurd and not just annoying is that you've got this little lip right there, and then you've got a worse one up here. And what that means is that a wheelchair user might not only have to figure out how to traverse both lips, but also might have to find a way to back down the ramp if they can't get off the ledge up there, which makes it unsafe. So I don't understand what happened here exactly.
Mm-hmm. So if things like this ramp are things that I wouldn't identify, unlike maybe the doors, for example, surely there are other things on campus too. Would you mind showing me some of them?
I would genuinely be delighted. Got a few hours?
In 2020, Carleton created the Coordinated Accessibility Strategy, or CAS. Carleton describes CAS as a multi-year plan that guides the university in its accessibility initiatives. One example is an accessibility audit, where university community members identify barriers to access on campus. Sarah first took me to the ramp that connects Ndeanon to the Tory building, a busy student thoroughfare. She said in past accessibility audits, students have raised concerns about the ramp. So this is the ramp you were talking about.
Yeah, the ramp, somebody should really do something about this, people have said for years. And the reason that it's so awful is, like, it doesn't look that steep, but it is when you see, like, trying to go around the corners and stuff. Just trying to, like, because it's so narrow, it's impossible for another wheelchair to pass me. I'd have to back down. Doable for me, but not really doable if somebody's in a manual chair. The thing that holds the handles into the wall of the ramp, I have gotten my arm skinned on them like several times because they're just like super sharp. And like I said, everybody mentions it.
There's a second accessible route between Ndeanon and the Tory building. It involves a different, larger ramp.
If you don't want to use that ramp, you can always go down this hill here, known as Cardiac Hill, affectionately. I will admit it's kind of fun to just zoom down this hill. It's basically like going up the 4 floors of Ndeanon and then into the quad, but you just go up a really big hill. And again, like, it's sort of borderline unsafe.
So how would a hill like this affect like an electric wheelchair's battery?
Badly. It would drain it a lot.
In her first year, Sarah asked campus services about snow clearing in front of her residence building.
The response that I got was, and this was 15 years ago, oh, well, you can just take the tunnels. And I was like, well, first of all, I shouldn't have to take the tunnels if I don't want to. And secondly, like, I actually want to leave this campus sometimes, like.
Mm-hmm. Fady Shanouda is a critical disability scholar at Carleton. He believes that the tunnels are what the university points to when promoting the accessibility of its campus.
To relegate disabled people underground, right? And call that accessibility is deeply problematic.
Bathrooms are another area of focus for Fady and his students. He says this campus bathroom meets many accessibility standards.
So we are in an accessible bathroom in the Loeb building, and I'm going to point out some of the accessibility features. For example, the push button here is accessible. You just have to jam it with your fist or with a bag or with part of your wheelchair or a cane, and it will lock. Similarly, with the emergency button, so if you fall or you need assistance, you can access care that way. The seat is height adjustable on the toilet. There's a visual fire alarm up in the ceiling, an essential part of ensuring this bathroom is accessible to deaf folks. The fact that people need to use the bathroom, it happens 2, 3, 4 times a day, right? And so this is a daily reminder to disabled people about how they do not have access to public and cultural spaces in the same way as non-disabled folks.
In 2024, Fady and his students tested over 330 bathrooms on campus to see how accessible they are. Some key findings from the study: 3 in 10 bathrooms have no wheelchair-accessible stalls. This stall's entrance is 85 centimeters by 93 centimeters. Ottawa's standards for accessibility require at least 1.5 meters in both directions, so a wheelchair can properly turn around. Shanouda's study also found that half of campus sinks have no automatic faucets. Almost none have adjustable heights, and 2/3 of bathroom stalls across campus had no door opening buttons. Fady's students created a campus map showing the qualities of a building's bathrooms. Each building then got a grade of 1 to 5. A 1 meant a building had no accessible bathrooms. A 5 was aspirational, with bathrooms accessible to everyone. Only the McCodrum Library and Nickel building received as high as a 4. Richcraft Hall, where journalists like Sarah spend most of their time, received a 2. But Fady's not the only scholar worried about his campus's accessibility. Mahtot Gebresselassie is an architectural researcher at York University in Toronto. She and her students have led studies on the accessibility of York's Keele campus.
Some of the problems, whether it's in the US, here in Canada, or abroad, is some buildings were built before accessibility legislations were put in place.
And so there's a difference in newer or older architecture, but how does the maintenance of that architecture also play into the conversation?
You need to make sure there are no unmaintained sidewalks that can be an obstacle for wheelchair users and people who have to navigate the sidewalks using canes and things like that.
Rachel Kwok knows all about infrastructure maintenance. She's a 4th-year journalism student and the vice president of Carleton's Association for Equity and Inclusion in Journalism and Media.
Okay, so just like 10 feet away, there's this giant pothole.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's got cracks all around it. And it didn't used to be this bad. I think with the winter and the salt, it's like expanded. And instead of taking that, I'd almost rather go around, which I do go around. But it is quite a bad pothole.
Mm-hmm. So you have to go like all the way around this triangle instead of just
going straight, and nobody really understands, and then I show them this pothole, and they're like, pothole. It could be really dangerous, honestly, if the curb cuts are not properly cut. And then there's one behind Dutton Tower and the library that is also like 2 inches off the ground. Can I be sarcastic again?
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that's a curb and not a curb cut. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, how do you expect me to get up this?
Right. Is this a curb that has been raised to the university?
I did try telling somebody, but I don't think they knew what I was talking about. The ground clearance is about 2.5 inches on a wheelchair. That is egregious.
It's one thing to say, yes, we want to educate everybody, including people with disabilities, but if the buildings and the campus is not accessible, it's like you invite a guest, but the venue is not accessible to them for a party.
It's been several weeks since we first started working on this story. I've made a number of calls to different departments across campus, trying to find out why this door is locked from the outside and if the button does actually work. It seems that the door is supposed to be unlocked, but sometimes isn't. Over the past few weeks, I've also reached out to Carleton's Media Relations Office multiple times, asking for an on-camera interview. After a series of back and forth by email and phone, I received a written statement from the university's media relations officer. It is almost word for word what is written on Carleton's website. The statement reads, "Carleton University takes pride in being considered one of Canada's most accessible universities. Since the launch of Carleton's Coordinated Accessibility Strategy in June 2020, progress has been made on almost all of the strategy's 40 recommendations. Carleton acknowledges that not everything in our community is accessible, and we are actively working to identify and implement accessibility solutions and prevent barriers." In the interest of fairness, we decided to try one more time to get an on-camera interview, so the university could respond directly to the things the people we interviewed pointed out to us. We offered to extend our production deadline, but the response came back almost immediately. No one was available for an interview.